What happens? Rich rancher gets in the wagon and hears mail order bride telling him to shut up. The reason was... Witness this unbelievable, true, inspired story right here on Whisper of the Past. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Let's get started. The dust swirled around the wagon wheels as cattle rancher William Big Bill Harrison climbed aboard his finest carriage, the polished oak glinting in the afternoon sun. At 42, Bill was one of the wealthiest men in the Montana Territory, a man whose reputation carried as much weight as the sprawling herds grazing on his 10,000 acres of land. His boots, polished to a shine by the ranch hands every morning, had seldom known the ache of hard labor. He was a man accustomed to giving orders and just as accustomed to being obeyed. When he had placed the advertisement for a mail order bride months ago, he imagined a quiet Boston lady, docile and eager to take on the role of rancher's wife, someone who would admire his wealth and accept his protection. "Now then, Miss Eleanor," Bill announced as he settled his considerable bulk onto the seat beside the young woman who had traveled across the country to meet him. "I reckon we'll make fine conversation on our way to the ranch. The trail's a bit long, but I've found it passes easier when—" "Shut up!" came the sharp, almost panicked whisper. Bill froze, his broad face registering shock. In all his years, through all the saloon deals, ranch meetings, and Sunday socials, no one, especially no woman, had ever told him to shut up. His mouth opened, his chest puffed in indignation. "Excuse me, young lady, but I don't think you understand who—" "I said shut up!" Eleanor Whitman's voice cut through the dry canyon air like a blade. Her green eyes were no longer fixed on him, but darting toward the rocky ledges that loomed on both sides of the trail. Her grip tightened suddenly on his arm, strong enough to surprise him. There was no coy Boston charm in her expression now. There was fear, urgency, and something Bill had not seen before in a woman's gaze, the calculating watchfulness of someone used to danger. Bill blinked, confused. "What in tarnation are you talking about?" His voice had dropped to a whisper now, more out of instinct than understanding. "Do you want to get us both killed?" Eleanor hissed. She was pale, her lips pressed tight as she slid one hand into her traveling bag and withdrew a small Derringer pistol. With quick, practiced motions, she checked the weapon, her trembling hands betraying both her fear and her readiness to use it. Bill's bewilderment deepened. "A pistol? What kind of Boston lady carries a pistol?" Eleanor ignored his remark. Her voice was low, almost a growl. "Those men at the station who offered to help with my trunk, did you notice them? The way they asked about the route to your ranch, the way their eyes never left us." Bill frowned, his memory supplying the image of three rough-looking fellows with unshaven faces and ragged coats. He had dismissed them as drifters, eager for a day's pay. "Well, now that you mention it, they seemed a mite too curious. Mighty interested in your bags, mighty interested in asking when I was heading back." Before Eleanor could answer, the canyon erupted with the thunderous crack of a rifle. The report echoed off the rock walls, and a bullet split the wooden seat inches from Bill's ear. He flinched, clutching his hat as the horses reared in terror. The reins nearly slipped from his grip. "Down!" Eleanor shouted, shoving his bulky frame lower against the seat. Another shot whined past, striking sparks from the iron rim of the wagon wheel. She raised her Derringer, eyes narrowing as she searched the canyon wall. Bill could only gape at the sudden transformation of the woman beside him, from the quiet mail-order bride who had stepped off the Boston train in a neat dress to a fighter who handled herself with the coolness of a soldier. Bill's world tilted. He had expected a pleasant ride, perhaps some nervous chatter about life in Montana, maybe even the shy smile of a woman who understood she had secured her future by marrying one of the richest ranchers in the territory. Instead, he found himself ducking rifle fire beside a woman who looked as though she had been preparing for this very moment. He tried to protest, to demand an explanation, but his voice caught in his throat as Eleanor fired back, the derringer's sharp report echoing like a firecracker. One of the distant shadows on the rocks jerked backward, tumbling down the slope in a spray of dust and gravel. Bill's hands, shaking more than he cared to admit, yanked the reins hard. The horses surged forward, hooves pounding as the wagon jolted over the uneven trail. "What in heaven's name is going on?" he managed to croak. Eleanor ducked lower, reloading with swift, precise movements that made it clear she had done this many times before. "They've been following me since Denver," she said. "I thought I lost them in Cheyenne, but when I saw their faces at the station, I knew it wasn't over." "Following you?" Bill's indignation wrestled with fear. "Why? You're supposed to be—" The next bullet cut his words short, striking the wagon's sideboard. The wood splintered, a jagged shard catching Bill's cheek. He winced, wiping the blood away with a hand that trembled far more than he wanted Eleanor to see. She fired again, her face grim. "There's no time for explanations. Just keep those horses moving. If they pin us in this canyon, we're done for." Bill swallowed hard, his world spinning. All his wealth, his ranch, his polished boots, none of it meant anything now. For the first time in years, he was not the man in control. The woman who was supposed to be his obedient bride had taken command, and he could do nothing but follow her orders. And yet, beneath the roar of gunfire and the thunder of hooves, something stirred within him, a flicker of respect, of reluctant admiration. Whoever Eleanor Whitman really was, she was no ordinary Boston lady. She was someone who carried secrets, someone who had just turned his entire life upside down. As the wagon careened around a sharp bend and another volley of rifle fire whistled past, Bill realized this journey to fetch his mail-order bride was not the beginning of a quiet domestic life. It was the start of something far more dangerous, far more unpredictable, and perhaps far more extraordinary than he had ever imagined. The canyon walls seemed to close in tighter with every turn, the air heavy with the smell of dust and gunpowder. Bill's knuckles were white as he clutched the reins, urging the horses onward even as fear churned in his gut. He had handled stampedes, floods and storms on the open range, but never had he felt so utterly powerless. The only thing keeping them alive was the woman seated beside him, her pistol steady, her eyes sharp as they scanned for shadows among the rocks. She didn't tremble now. She was calm, methodical, a predator instead of prey. "Who are you?" Bill finally shouted above the pounding of hooves and the echo of gunfire. "No Boston lady shoots like that." Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line as she fired again, sending one of their attackers sprawling. "Pinkerton Detective Agency," she called back, her voice fierce but steady. "Eleanor Whitman is my name, but not for the reason you and think. I'm not here for marriage, Mr. Harrison. I'm here on assignment." The words hit Bill harder than any bullet could have. Pinkerton. He had heard of them, detectives who hunted train robbers, counterfeiters, and murderers across the frontier. Men in saloons spoke of them with equal parts respect and fear, but a woman, a mail-order bride who turned out to be a Pinkerton agent. His mind reeled. "You mean this whole thing? The letters, the trip out here? You weren't serious?" Bill demanded, his voice cracking with a mixture of betrayal and disbelief. Eleanor reloaded, her hands moving swiftly, her eyes never leaving the canyon rim. "Your advertisement was the perfect cover," she explained. "The Cassidy gangs, been moving through the territories, hitting banks, stagecoaches and ranches. They're clever. They find out which ranchers are wealthy, which banks hold the cattlemen's money, and they strike with precision. I've been on their trail for months, and when I saw your notice, I realized your ranch might be their next target. By answering it, I could get close without raising suspicion." Bill let out a bitter laugh, though it was more a bark of disbelief. "So all this time, I was writing to a detective instead of a bride." Her eyes flicked to him then, sharp and unflinching. "Yes, and it kept me alive long enough to track them here. But it seems they finally recognized me. There's a price on my head now. That's why you need to listen to me if you want to see your ranch again." Before Bill could reply, another rifle cracked from above. Splinters rained down as the wagon lurched violently. Eleanor returned fire, her aim deadly. A rider screamed and toppled from his horse, the animal bolting into the brush. The remaining pursuers slowed, clearly unsettled by her marksmanship. "Up ahead!" Eleanor pointed to a narrow cut in the rock. "Turn there. It's too tight for their horses." Bill yanked the reins, nearly toppling from the seat as the wagon swerved hard. The horses plunged up the trail, straining against the incline, their flanks lathered in sweat. The gunfire grew fainter as the canyon walls fell behind them, replaced by the grinding of wheels over stone and the ragged sound of Bill's breathing. When they finally crested a ledge and found themselves in a shallow hollow ringed by boulders, he pulled the team to a halt. The horses stamped and blew, trembling from exhaustion. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the occasional crack of settling stone in the canyon below. Bill's chest heaved, his shirt clinging with sweat. He stared at Eleanor, who was calmly checking her weapon again. And for the first time since he met her, he realized she wasn't just brave. She was something far more dangerous than that. She was competent. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she hadn't hesitated to risk her life for his. "So," Bill said finally, his voice rough, "the Cassidy gang. You're saying they were going to hit me? My ranch?" Eleanor nodded, her auburn hair loose around her face, damp with sweat. "They've been using informants. Hired hands, stage drivers, even saloon girls who overhear where the money's being kept. Once they know enough, they strike fast. I was supposed to identify their Montana contacts before they made their move. But now that they've seen me, everything's accelerated." Bill rubbed his jaw, his earlier anger shifting to unease. For all his wealth and land, he realized he was nothing more than a fat prize for outlaws with rifles. If not for Eleanor, he might already be lying dead on the canyon floor. The thought unsettled him deeply. "And what happens now, Miss Detective?" he asked, the sarcasm softening in his tone. She holstered the derringer and finally allowed herself a small smile. "Now, Mr. Harrison, you need protection until we bring the rest of the gang down. I can't abandon my mission, and you can't return to your ranch without making yourself a target. We'll use your place as bait, but on our terms." She hesitated, then added quietly, "And maybe when this is over, we can discuss your proposal under more honest circumstances." Bill blinked, taken aback. Amidst the danger and deception, her words stirred something unexpected in him. He had wanted a wife for companionship, someone to share his wealth and his home. But now he found himself wondering if what he really wanted was this, someone who could stand at his side as an equal, who could match him in wit and courage. The sound of distant hooves pulled him from his thoughts. Eleanor's expression hardened. Again, they're regrouping. They won't give up so easily. "The Cassidy gang doesn't like to lose face." Bill stood, drawing the revolver he had carried more for show than need. His hands still shook, but his voice was steady. "Then let's give them a fight they'll remember." Eleanor studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Good, but remember this. You don't win gunfights by being brave. You win them by being smart. Do what I say, when I say it, and maybe we'll both live to see tomorrow." Together they prepared their position among the rocks, Eleanor laying out ammunition, while Bill steadied himself with deep breaths. For the first time in his life, Bill Harrison felt small, not because of his size, but because of how little control he had. Yet in that humility, something else bloomed: resolve. As the sun dipped lower, painting the Montana sky in shades of crimson and gold, the first riders appeared again on the canyon rim. Eleanor's hand brushed his as she raised her pistol, and though the gesture was accidental, it steadied him. They were two people from different worlds, a wealthy rancher and a detective in disguise, yet fate had bound them together in this desperate fight. Bill drew his revolver, leveling it at the shadows creeping closer. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but one truth had settled deep in his heart. He no longer wanted a quiet, obedient bride. He wanted this: danger, fire, and a partner who could stand with him against the world. When Eleanor glanced his way, a faint, wry smile curving her lips, he knew she understood. Whatever happened tonight, their story was only just beginning.